The rain was relentless, hammering the pavement like it wanted to drown the world. Brandon sat on the curb outside his apartment, soaked to the bone, his heart a heavier weight than the storm. At 3 a.m., with nowhere else to go, he stumbled to the one place he never thought he'd end up, his neighbor's porch. Brandon's life in the sleepy town of Willow Creek, Oregon, wasn't supposed to be like this. At 25, he'd moved here chasing a dream, a quiet place to write his novel, a fresh start after a messy breakup in Seattle. But dreams don't pay rent, and tonight, his landlord's eviction notice burned a hole in his pocket. His ex, Trevor, had drained their joint account before ghosting him, leaving Brandon with nothing but a suitcase and a broken spirit. He clutched his knees, shivering, as the rain blurred his vision. The world felt like it was collapsing, and he was too tired to fight it. Across the street, the porch light of the corner house flickered on. Ethan Caldwell, the town's resident recluse, stood in the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the warm glow. Ethan was a mystery wrapped in a scowl, 28, blonde, with eyes like a winter sky and a reputation for hating everyone. Neighbors whispered about his past, a former firefighter who'd left Portland under a cloud of rumors. He never smiled, never waved, never spoke unless forced. Yet, as Brandon sat sobbing on Ethan's porch steps, something shifted. "You're going to catch pneumonia out here," Ethan's voice cut through the rain, low and gruff. Brandon flinched, wiping his face, but the tears mixed with the raindrops. He expected a lecture, maybe a threat to call the cops. Instead, Ethan stepped closer, his leather jacket slick with water. "Get inside." Now, Brandon hesitated, but the exhaustion won. He followed Ethan into the house, the warmth of the living room hitting him like a wave. Ethan tossed him a towel, his expression unreadable. "Why my porch?" he asked, folding his arms. "I didn't know where else to go," Brandon admitted, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't snap. Instead, he gestured to the couch. "Sit. Dry off. Talk if you want." It wasn't an invitation, it was a command. But when Brandon sank into the cushions, Ethan sat across from him, and for the first time, those icy blue eyes didn't feel cold. They talked until dawn. Brandon spilled everything: the eviction, Trevor's betrayal, the novel he couldn't finish. Ethan listened, his silence steady, grounding. When Brandon's voice broke, Ethan moved to the couch, pulling him into a tight embrace. It was unexpected, electric, and safe. For the first time in months, Brandon didn't feel alone. The next morning, Brandon woke on Ethan's couch, a blanket tucked around him. Ethan was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes with the same intensity he applied to everything. "Eat," he said, sliding a plate across the counter. No smile, no warmth, just Ethan being Ethan. "Thanks," Brandon mumbled, his cheeks burning. The memory of last night's embrace lingered, but Ethan's gruff demeanor was back, like a wall had snapped into place. Brandon wanted to ask why Ethan had held him, why he'd let a stranger into his home, but the words stuck in his throat. Over the next week, Brandon crashed at a friend's place while searching for a new apartment. He saw Ethan around Willow Creek, grabbing coffee at the diner, fixing his motorcycle in the driveway, but Ethan barely acknowledged him. The town's gossip mill churned. Ethan was a loner, a man scarred by a tragedy no one fully understood. Some said he'd lost someone in a fire. Others swore he'd been dishonorably discharged. Brandon didn't care about the rumors. He just wanted to understand the man who'd held him together when he was falling apart. One evening, Brandon spotted Ethan at the local bar, nursing a whiskey alone. Heart pounding, Brandon slid into the seat next to him. "You never talk to anyone," Brandon said, half teasing. "Why'd you let me in that night?" Ethan's eyes flicked to him, sharp and guarded. "You were crying on my porch." "I'm not a monster." He downed his drink and stood. Don't read into it. But Brandon did read into it. He couldn't stop. Every glance Ethan spared him felt like a puzzle piece, and he was desperate to see the whole picture. When Brandon finally found a cheap studio apartment, he left a thank you note on Ethan's porch, a small gesture, but it felt like a bridge. Willow Creek's annual fall festival brought the town to life with lanterns, music, and cider stalls. Brandon, still settling into his new place, decided to attend, hoping to clear his head. He didn't expect to see Ethan there, leaning against a tree, watching the crowd with his usual scowl. But when their eyes met, Ethan didn't look away. "Thought you hated this stuff," Brandon said, approaching with a nervous grin. "I do," Ethan replied, but he didn't move. They ended up walking through the festival together, the air crisp with autumn. Ethan's walls cracked just enough for Brandon to glimpse the man beneath. Dry humor, a love for classic rock, a quiet passion for woodworking. When Brandon tripped over a root, Ethan's hand shot out, steadying him. Their fingers lingered, and Brandon's heart raced. "Why do you push everyone away?" Brandon asked later, as they sat on a bench overlooking the river. Ethan's expression darkened. "People leave, or they get hurt. I'm done with both." He didn't elaborate, but the weight of his words hung heavy. Brandon wanted to press, but something in Ethan's eyes begged him not to. That night, Brandon couldn't sleep. He wrote feverishly, pouring his feelings into his novel, a story of two men finding solace in each other. He didn't realize he was writing about Ethan until he reread the pages. Winter settled over Willow Creek, blanketing the town in snow. Brandon's novel was gaining traction with a small publisher, but his thoughts kept drifting to Ethan. They've fallen into a rhythm: coffee runs, late-night talks on Ethan's porch, moments where their hands brushed and neither pulled away. But Ethan always stopped short, retreating behind his walls. One night, a fire broke out at the community center. Brandon, volunteering at the event, was trapped in the chaos as smoke filled the air. Panic surged, but then Ethan was there, cutting through the crowd like a force of nature. He'd been nearby, heard the sirens, and ran straight into the danger. He pulled Brandon out, his grip firm, his eyes wild with fear. Outside, coughing and shaken, Brandon clung to Ethan. "You could have died," Ethan growled, but his voice cracked. "Don't do that to me." "Do what?" Brandon challenged, breathless. "Make you care." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he didn't let go. Instead, he kissed Brandon, fierce, desperate, like he was afraid it might be his last chance. The world fell away, and for a moment, it was just them, standing in the snow as the fire trucks wailed. The kiss changed everything, but Ethan pulled back the next day, retreating further than ever. Brandon was done with the push and pull. He marched to Ethan's house, banging on the door. "You don't get to kiss me and then act like it didn't happen," he said when Ethan finally answered. Ethan's face was a storm of emotions. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low. "I can't do this." "Then tell me why," Brandon demanded. And Ethan did. He told Brandon about the fire in Portland, the one that took his partner, Luca. Ethan had been a firefighter, but he couldn't save Luca. The guilt had driven him to Willow Creek, where he'd vowed to keep everyone at arm's length. "I can't lose someone again," he whispered. Brandon's heart broke for him. He stepped closer, cupping Ethan's face. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Let me in." That night, they held each other, no walls left between them. Ethan's vulnerability was a gift, and Brandon vowed to cherish it. Spring brought renewal to Willow Creek. Brandon's novel was published, dedicated to Ethan, who read it with tears in his eyes. They were together now, building a life in the town that had once felt like a dead end. Ethan started opening up, even joining the community center's rebuilding efforts. The townsfolk noticed the change, whispering about the grumpy neighbor who'd found his smile. One night, on Ethan's porch, Brandon curled into his arms, the stars bright above them. "I came here broken," Brandon said. "You fix me." Ethan kissed his forehead. "You fix me too." Their love wasn't perfect. There were fights, fears, moments of doubt. But every time Brandon cried, Ethan was there, holding him tight. And in those moments, they knew they'd found something worth fighting for, a love that could weather any storm.